Application denied. For the fourth and final time, this board has no obligation to enable a hobby farm.
The words hung in the wood-paneled chamber like a sentence already decided.
Furthermore, the board has voted to rezone Parcel 4B to residential. Effective immediately, agricultural activity is prohibited.
4 councilmen didn't even look at her. Stephen Winthorpe, chairman, just capped his pen.
They think this is the end. They think a zoning line can stop it.
Charlotte Vance did not plead. She had learned across 3 hearings before this one that Tares bought nothing from these men. She stood, gathered a worn manila folder from the table, and walked past the zoning board sign into the harsh morning light.
Sell. Take the cash. Buy the land no one wants. That's the only way.
What the board had just done was not the end of her farming. It was the moment she stopped asking permission. She didn't look back. The folder under her arm held papers they assumed were defeated, but Charlotte was already calculating a different equation. In a developer's office, she signed away her 10 acres without hesitation. The check was larger than any harvest had ever yielded.
They can have the bottom land. I am buying something no one else sees.
The 40 acres of limestone hillside sat outside the town line, listed as unfarmable for a century.
Unfarmable, they said. That's what they said about the rock vineyards of the Loire.
She stopped at a raw limestone outcropping, the rock sharp under her boots, and knelt.
Calcareous, high mineral. Exactly the kind of ground Grandpa's notes described.
She stood and looked out over the 40 acres of chalk and sharp stone.
Everyone sees rock. I see drainage, minerality, a century of untouched possibility.
She let the soil trickle through her fingers, then closed her fist around what was left. The decision was already made. She didn't need to taste it to know. She swung the pickaxe alone, from dawn until her gloves split and her blisters hardened.
Every terrace I shape is a line they can't redraw.
At dusk, she studied her grandfather's journals by a headlamp, the pages yellowed and brittle. September 1963. Winthorpe told me there was no place for a Vance in this county. Advised me to find work elsewhere.
He pushed you out, but he couldn't erase what you knew.
Her palms bled on the pickaxe handle, but the hill started to obey.
Grandpa's diagrams showed how to angle each terrace. I set every stone by his math.
She slept under the open sky, the rough limestone still warm from the day's sun.
This rock will yield something no one expects, and they'll pay attention when it does.
When the first frost arrived, 10 stepped terraces rose from the dead hillside, a geometry of pure will. She planted the first rootstocks that spring, varietals her grandfather had recommended for limestone soil, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre.
These roots will dig deeper than any Winthorpe vineyards. They'll search the limestone for minerals those men never understood.
The first summer was a battle. She carried water by hand, bucket after bucket, against the limestone's endless thirst.
Grow, survive. This hill is banking on you, and so am I.
By the 3rd year, the vines flowered. She pruned with the precision of a surgeon, guided by her grandfather's sketches.
The clusters are tiny, dense. The berries will concentrate every mineral this rock has locked away for 1,000,000 years.
In the 4th autumn, the terraces sagged under dark, almost black grapes, the skins coated in a dusty, silvery bloom. She built a stone cellar from the same limestone she'd cut, and crushed the grapes by foot. The old way, the only way worth doing. When the young wine rested in oak, she drew a sample one evening and held the glass up to the cellar's dusty light.
This isn't just good. It's the revenge in a bottle, and they're going to choke on it.
She packed 1 bottle for Jean-Luc Moreau, the sommelier who had exposed 100 frauds with a single sentence.
If he knows what he's tasting, he'll know this isn't just wine. It's a messenger.
Meanwhile, the Winthorpe bottling line clanked through another 1,000 cases of a blend built to offend no one.
The same safe mediocrity every year. It sells. That's what matters.
3 weeks later, her phone rang. The accent on the other end was low, unhurried, and entirely Parisian.
Vance Vineyard.
Mademoiselle Vance, I will come. but I promise nothing. The wine you sent was interesting. That is all I will say over a wire.
He arrived on a raw afternoon, standing at the edge of the terraces like a man who had seen too many beautiful failures.
Limestone. I have heard such promises before. The rock gives, but rarely with grace.
Charlotte poured. He swirled, inhaled, and let the wine rest on his palate longer than any polite tasting required. His professional mask, the one that had survived 30 vintages, simply dissolved. Jean-Luc Moreau published 3 days later, score, 94 points. A mineral masterpiece from impossible terroir. The facts came through at dawn. She held the paper in the cellar's half-light, reading the number again and again.
This isn't luck. This is the answer to every closed door.
Within a week, the distribution trucks found her road. They parked bumper to bumper below the terraces. In the Winthorpe boardroom, Stephen read the same review. The glass in his hand didn't survive the first paragraph.
Some amateur on a rock pile. 94 points? This review was bought, or the man's palate is dead.
His sales director handed him the week's retail data. 3 major chains had cut the Winthorpe blend to make space for Vance.
This is a local problem. Remind the buyers they need our volume. Call every distributor that owes us a favor.
But in the grocery aisles, the 94 points shelf talker was already moving product faster than any winery rep could undo.
This cannot stand. A zoning board won't stop her anymore. I'll have to use something sharper.
Stephen spent the morning on the telephone, the receiver white-knuckled in his grip.
Pull every bottle of Vance from your shelves, or you lose every Winthorpe case. Am I clear?
In 3 county shops, the clerks pulled Vance bottles from the shelves, stacking them in back rooms like contraband. Charlotte heard it from a young clerk who called, apologetic, and read the corporate memo aloud.
So Stephen's weapon is his distribution chain. Let him swing it. His power ends at the county line.
That afternoon, she opened a laptop in the cellar and started building a direct-to-consumer wine club.
Subscription tiers, private mailing list, no distributor to veto. Wine straight from my cellar to their door.
A week later, the cellar exit was lined with cardboard boxes, each addressed to a city outside Stephen's reach. The local shops kept his blend on the shelves, but the real money was already leaving the state in padded cases.
Let him celebrate. I am not fighting for shelf space anymore. I am building a brand that doesn't need his permission.
Stephen's overproduction and lost contracts were no longer a threat. They were a hemorrhage. A regional bank quietly moved his expired notes into a category they called non-performing. Charlotte walked into that bank wearing a navy blazer, her hair pulled tight, and asked to see the distressed debt portfolio.
The shell company is in place. One signature, and Winthorpe's paper becomes my leverage.
She slid the signed acquisition across the glass desk. The transfer was immediate, the paper trail untraceable to anyone without her name. Back in her truck, she opened the envelope. A slim stack of yellowing notes, each stamped Winthorpe Estates, note of default.
30 years of arrogance, reduced to paper I can call in with one phone call.
She placed the notes in a plain folder and stored it in the cellar desk, next to a weathered diary she hadn't finished reading. The vineyard was flowering outside, but the real harvest was sitting in that drawer, waiting for the perfect moment.
Stephen Winthorpe has no idea he's already lost. The war is about to become very simple.
The regional wine festival opened under a white tent, the local vintners lining their bottles on the tasting tables, while Stephen Winthorpe approached the podium.
Tradition isn't built on a single vintage or a single lucky season. It's earned over generations. We know who we are.
His gaze swept the audience and stopped. Midway back, under a simple cotton dress, sat Charlotte Vance.
We even welcome the amateurs, the ones who got lucky with a patch of rock and a friendly reviewer. Let them have their moment.
Charlotte did not shift in her seat. She placed her hands flat on her knees and held his stare, her expression a stone.
Let the snake hiss. The bite is already waiting in my desk drawer.
The speech ended to polite applause, but before the tent could empty, a representative from a national distributor stepped to the microphone. We are proud to announce that our exclusive regional partner will now be Vance Vineyard, effective immediately. Stephen's mouth opened soundlessly. His wine, the one he'd held throughout his speech, slipped from his fingers and shattered on the platform.
That sound, glass breaking, that's the sound of an empire cracking. And he hasn't even seen the real hammer yet.
2 days after the festival, the Winthorpe board convened an emergency session. They demanded a buyer, a merger, anything. Stephen refused.
I will not hand this company to vultures. I built it. I will fix it.
By the end of the week, a formal notice arrived from the regional bank. His debt notes had been acquired by an anonymous holding company.
Who bought them? I demand a name. There has to be a name.
The voice on the other end was polite and empty. The holding company was a shell, registered in Delaware, impenetrable, 30 miles away. Charlotte opened a laptop in her stone cellar. The screen displayed a financial dashboard. Winthorpe, debts, status, acquired.
Done. The collar is fitted. I just have to wait for him to feel it tighten.
She closed the laptop and walked out into the vineyard rows, where the late sun was turning the grapes to dark garnets. Stephen didn't know yet. He was still making phone calls, still threatening distribution managers, still believing he was the hunter. The trap was set. The only thing missing was the word that would spring it. One evening, she pulled the diary from the drawer and opened it to a page she knew by heart, but needed to see again. April, 1962. I asked Elton Winthorpe for the cellar hand position after my vines failed. He told me the county had no room for little men, and that a Vance would never touch a Winthorpe barrel. He advised me to leave.
They said there was no room for you, so I've made a room from rock, and soon a Winthorpe will work in it.
In a faded photograph tucked beside the diary, a younger George Vance stood hat in hand, his face turned away from a stern man in an expensive suit. Charlotte lifted the stack of yellowing debt notes from the desk and laid them inside the diary's worn cover, then closed them together.
Now the past and the present are in the same envelope. One delivers the other.
She closed the folder with the sound of a safe door shutting, the finality echoing in the stone-walled quiet.
When Stephen comes looking for a deal, he'll find the same answer his grandfather gave, an open door and an invitation to work.
The debt was a weapon, but the diary was the reason it would be used. Together, they were the most patient kind of dynamite. All that remained was the man who would open it. 3 weeks passed in a slow hemorrhage. Stephen's winery was now officially in default, and his board had abandoned him.
The debt holder is still anonymous, but if I can absorb Vance Vineyard, I can show the bank new revenue. It's the only card left.
He didn't know the anonymous holding company was Charlotte's. The rumor he'd heard only named a California group. To Stephen, she was still just an amateur.
Miss Vance, this is Stephen Winthorpe. I believe we should discuss a partnership. My resources, your product. Let's stop fighting and come to an arrangement.
In her stone cellar, Charlotte lifted the receiver. She had been expecting this call. The timing was almost too perfect.
Mr. Winthorpe, you are calling to offer a partnership? After everything?
Let's speak in person. I'll come to you tomorrow afternoon. We can sort out the details then.
She agreed without argument. When she hung up, the folder was already out of the drawer, its contents heavier than any wine bottle. The next afternoon, Stephen's SUV crunched up the gravel drive, a plume of white dust rising behind it. The vineyard lay green and orderly above. Charlotte watched from the farmhouse window, the folder tucked under her arm. She didn't smile. The door was open, and the trap was about to close. Stephen stepped inside, his suit still crisp despite the dust. A bottle of his own blend tucked under his arm, like a surrender flag.
Miss Vance, I've had a lot of time to reflect. We've been fighting over the same patch of earth when we could be leading the county together. My winery can handle distribution, marketing, the dull side of the business. You stay the artist, the face. We split the revenue. Everyone wins.
Same pitch his grandfather gave mine. Let us handle everything. You stay small. The arrogance is hereditary.
She let him talk. His offer hung in the air, and she let it hang.
You've come all this way to offer me a backseat in a car you are driving into bankruptcy. But before we discuss your proposal, there's something you should see.
Her hand found the folder, brown, unmarked, thicker than it looked, and she placed it on the table between them.
What is this? A contract of her own? The girl's been planning a counteroffer. Fine, I'll listen.
Charlotte's fingers slid the folder across the wood, the sound a dry whisper that filled the room.
Open it, Mr. Winthorpe. This is the only partnership you are going to get.
Stephen's hands were not steady when he opened the folder. The paper inside was yellow mortgage paper, and it bore his signature at the bottom.
My notes, the ones the bank sold. That anonymous holding company, she's tied to it.
Beneath the notes lay a single diary page, the words sharp and familiar. April 1962. I asked Elton Winthorpe for a job. He told me to leave the county.
My grandfather, George Vance, was a master vintner. Your grandfather denied him a job and told him to leave the county. That page is his voice.
This is a setup. She has my notes. She is the holding company.
The holding company is mine. I bought your debt through a shell. Your winery is a house of cards. I can collapse with one call.
The color had gone from Stephen's face. His own wine bottle stood untouched like a forgotten prop.
2 years ago, you denied me a farm permit because you didn't want competition. This is what that denial bought you. The end of your winery, or something else.
She didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She let the silence do its work, her eyes never leaving his. The table between them held two futures, and Charlotte held the pen. She wasn't ready to write yet. Charlotte pushed back her chair and walked to the window, her silhouette framed by the vineyard terraces she had carved from limestone.
I don't want your money or your winery. I built my own. What I want is something your grandfather denied mine. In 1962, George Vance asked Elton Winthorpe for a cellar hand position. He was told no and run out of the county. So here is my offer. I am offering you a job, the same job. Cellar hand at Vance Vineyard. You'll work under my roof for as long as I see fit.
She pulled a single sheet of paper from the folder, a crisp employment contract, the header already printed with the Vance Vineyard letterhead.
Sign this, and your debt is forgiven. Refuse, and I call the bank in the morning. Your winery, your home, your name, gone.
A cellar hand, me. She's offering me a bucket and a hose, and if I don't take it, I lose everything.
He stared at the paper like a man watching his own prison sentence typed out in neat, professional lines.
You have until dawn to decide. Take the paper with you. If you come back, come ready to work.
The contract sat between them, the ink dry, the future a question mark. Stephen didn't answer. He couldn't.
You vindictive little. No court will enforce this. I'll drag your name through every paper in this state.
The debt notes include a personal guarantee and an assignment clause that gives me rights to the Winthorpe brand. There is no court, only liquidation.
Her voice carried the kind of certainty that made lawyers unnecessary. Stephen's legal threats wilted in the silence.
Dawn, Mr. Winthorpe. If you are not back here ready to work, I make one call. Your entire legacy becomes a notice in the legal section.
He stumbled out of the farmhouse into the purple dusk, the contract crumpled in his fist. The door closed with a click that sounded like a cell locking.
A cellar hand. My grandfather put hers out, and now she's offering me a shovel in return, and I have to take it.
Inside, Charlotte stood at the window, a glass of her own vintage cradled in her fingers. She watched his taillights disappear down the gravel road.
He'll sign. The pride of a Winthorpe weighs less than the fear of being nothing. By morning, the wheel will turn.
The vineyard slept under the same stars that had watched her grandfather leave. But this time, someone was coming back to balance the books. Dawn was only hours away, and with it, the signature that would seal a 60-year debt. The first gray light found Stephen's SUV already parked at the bottom of the gravel drive. He had been there an hour. He climbed out stiffly, the creased contract held flat against his chest, and walked toward the farmhouse. Charlotte opened the door before he knocked. She was already in her overalls, a steaming mug of coffee in her hand.
I'll sign.
She held his gaze for one unreadable moment, then stepped aside and motioned toward the table, set for a single transaction. The table held only a pen, and the crisp employment contract, its signature line pale under the morning light. He stopped before the chair, and for a breath, looked at the pen as if it might bite. Then he sat down, the contract already bearing the smudges of a sleepless night, and reached for the pen. The nib touched paper, and the scratch of ink filled the silence. The 60-year debt was not paid in money. It was settled in one trembling stroke of a pen. When he lifted the pen, Charlotte stepped forward, took the contract, and signed her own name beneath his without ceremony. Then she opened the door to the work porch where her foreman, a sturdy man, was waiting.
The fermentation tanks need cleaning. Show him.
The foreman looked from Charlotte to Stephen's ashen face, and no explanation was needed. He simply held the cellar door open, the darkness inside smelling of wet stone and crushed grapes. Stephen paused at the threshold, the odor of labor rising to meet him.
A Winthorpe will scrub my tanks. The earth won't shift, but it will remember.
She didn't watch him descend. She turned back to the window, where the new sun had cleared the ridge. Outside, the vineyard rows stood orderly, heavy with the promise of the next harvest. The ink was dry. The debt was not canceled, but it had been turned, finally, into something that could grow. Later, she walked the high terrace alone, the rows below her rippling like a calm sea of green.
40 acres of rock, and now this. Grandpa would have stood right here.
She didn't speak. The land had always done her talking. At dusk, the workers gathered by the press. She raised a glass, no speech, just one nod that said everything.
To the dirt that fed us, and the stone that kept us honest.
They drank, then returned to the vines. The work never stopped, and that was the point. She stayed until the light went gold, then lifted a single bottle from the barrel room.
This one isn't for sale. It's for the man who drew the terraces in pencil long before I touched a pickaxe.
She placed it on the old oak desk beside her grandfather's diary and the faded photograph. The past was not resolved, but it was no longer a wound. It was the soil under her boots. The Winthorpe sign was taken down quietly. A sold notice stapled over the wrought iron scrollwork. No auction, no ceremony, just the end of a family that had mistaken county politics for permanence. The zoning board chamber sat empty, chairs pushed back, papers scattered. The seat at the head, where Stephen had once smiled, now gathered a thin layer of dust. Meanwhile, the gravel road up to Vance Vineyard was repaved, and a hand-painted sign welcomed visitors. The 40 acres of unfarmable stone had become the most sought-after terroir in the region. Soil that had been written off a century ago now nourished a 94-point vintage. The town councilman who had denied her permit never convened again with the same authority. The old power structure had collapsed under the weight of its own mediocrity, and the hillside itself stood as the final verdict. Green, orderly, and absolutely beyond any board's reach. Down in the old limestone cellar, Stephen Winthorpe stood in a stained apron, hosing out a fermentation tank. The hose hummed, and the water washed the purple sediment down the drain in a monotonous rhythm. He did not look up when footsteps passed on the stone stairs. He had learned that no one here was coming to give orders for his sake. His hands, once soft around a boardroom gavel, now were dry and chapped from soaking oak barrels. At noon, he paused to wipe his brow with a rag that left a gray streak of old must across his temple. He did not grumble. The contract gave him no audience for complaints. The other workers ignored him. He was not a curiosity. He was just Another man with a hose. Some debts are paid in money. This one was being paid in the smallest, steadiest increments of time. He would finish this tank, then another, then the next harvest. The seller didn't care about surnames, and outside, the vines waited, patient as the stone, for whatever the next season would bring. Dawn rose pale over the 40 acres, the terraces breathing mist into a quiet that held the world still. Charlotte climbed to the highest terrace, where the oldest limestone jutted from the earth. Her boots were wet with dew, her overalls damp from the vines she brushed against. At the edge, a flat boulder waited, its face newly carved with deep, deliberate letters. The words, carved deep into the ancient limestone, read, "They banned her. She won." The rock that had been declared useless now bore the verdict of the woman it had served. The sun broke the ridge and set the terraces ablaze with golden light. She stood there, a silhouette against the blazing terraces, the proof around her. The vineyard stretched below, green and perfectly ordered, a living monument to something older than revenge. The only sound was the rustle of vines and the distant hum of a cellar door opening to the new day.